I'm Ben, 22, a tech enthusiast and aspiring game developer. For years, I've poured my heart and savings into building my dream PC. It wasn't just a hobby. This rig was my creative workstation, my escape, and my source of freelance income. I saved every penny from odd jobs, birthday checks, and freelance gigs to assemble this beast of a machine. It cost me $3,600, but for me it represented years of effort and passion. My family. Different story. My parents. Mark and Linda have always been the "we know what's best for you" type. But what they really meant was "we know what's best for your younger sister." Amy. Amy is 18, a high school senior with a taste for designer clothes and the latest trends. If you've ever met someone who acts like the world is their personal runway, that's Amy. My parents have always bent over backwards to cater to her every whim, even if it meant stepping all over me to do it. Growing up, the message was clear. Amy comes first. If money was tight, it was my interest that had to take the hit. When I wanted a decent camera for my photography project in high school, my parents said no, too expensive. But the following month, Amy got a brand new iPhone for her birthday. When I suggested I might want to study game design in college, my dad chuckled and said, "Focus on a real career, Ben." It stung, but I learned to manage my expectations. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. It was a Saturday and I had just come back from hanging out with my best friend Jake. We'd been strategizing for an upcoming gaming tournament we planned to enter. I felt good, motivated. But when I opened my bedroom door, my heart sank. My desk was empty. My PC monitors, peripherals, everything was gone. For a second, I thought we'd been robbed. I rushed downstairs, my mind racing. My parents were in the living room, sipping coffee like it was just another Saturday. Mom. "Dad, where's my computer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom didn't even flinch. "Oh, we sold it," she said, setting her mug down like it was the most casual thing in the world. My brain struggled to process what she had just said. "You what?" "Sold it, my $3,600 PC. Why would you do that?" Dad sighed, not even looking up from his tablet. "Amy needed new clothes for her senior event. We didn't have the money, so we sold your computer. It was just sitting there. Just sitting there." That machine wasn't just sitting there. It was my livelihood. I felt my pulse spike. "That wasn't just a computer, Dad. I use that for work. That PC is how I make money. How am I supposed to hit my deadlines now?" Mom shot me a disapproving look. "Don't take that tone with us. We're your parents. We did what was best for the family. Best for the family. Or best for Amy." I snapped. "You had no right. That PC was mine. I paid for every part with my own money." My dad leaned back, clearly annoyed that I was challenging him. "Freelance work isn't a real job, Ben. You spend more time gaming than working. You'll survive." That cut deep. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. "It wasn't just for gaming, it was my work setup. It took me years to save up for that rig, and you sold it without even asking me." My mom crossed her arms, her tone turning icy. "Amy had a big event coming up and you're a grown man. You can handle disappointment better." I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, about valuing my time and effort. But my parents clearly didn't see it that way. I stormed back up to my now barren room, my heart pounding in my chest. As I sat on my stripped-down desk staring at the empty space where my PC used to be, I felt the anger settle into something colder, sharper. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a line crossed. They had made it clear how little my efforts and passions mattered to them. That night I texted Jake telling him what happened. His response was immediate. "Dude, that's messed up. They didn't even tell you." "Nope, just sold it without a word, and for what? So Amy can play princess at some high school event. Man, that's next level. You need to do something about this." He was right. I couldn't just let this slide. They had disrespected me for the last time. And that's when I started plotting my next move. A move they would never see coming. The days that followed felt like a bad dream. Every time I walked past my empty desk, it hit me. My parents had sold my hard-earned PC without a second thought, all to fund Amy's latest fashion spree. I couldn't focus, couldn't work, and every freelance deadline felt like a ticking time bomb without my rig. One evening, I confronted Amy. She was in her room twirling in front of the mirror in one of her new dresses, phone in hand, taking mirror selfies. I leaned against her doorframe, arms crossed, trying to keep my anger in check. You know, Mom and Dad sold my PC to buy you all this, right? I said, my voice tight. She paused, glanced at me through the mirror, then shrugged. So it's just a computer? You're always playing games anyway. You can build another one. Just a computer. Her words hit me like a slap. It wasn't just a computer, Amy. It was my work, my income, my passion. I saved for years to build that rig. She rolled her eyes, flipping her hair over one shoulder. Not my problem, besides, you're the one always bragging about how independent you are. Maybe this is a sign you should move out or something. Her indifference stunned me. She had no idea how much she had just pushed me over the edge. I turned and left without another word, my mind racing. She didn't see me as a brother, just another inconvenience she could step over. That night, as I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, I realized this wasn't just about the PC. It was about respect. It was about my parents never seeing me as more than the backup plan for Amy. Something snapped inside me. I was done being the second priority, the one whose efforts went unnoticed. The next day, I started planning. If they thought I'd just swallow this, they had another thing coming. I pulled out my old clunky laptop and began gathering everything. Receipts for my PC parts, screenshots of my freelance work, even tax forms proving my income. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. A few nights later, I finally brought it up at dinner. I waited until the table was quiet. Mom pouring wine into her glass. Dad tapping away on his tablet. Amy scrolling through her phone. I want my money back, I said, my voice steady but cold. My mom looked up, blinking in surprise. Excuse me, you sold my PC, my property. Without my consent, I want the $600 it's worth. My dad sighed, not even looking up. Oh, here we go. Ben, don't be dramatic. You're a grown man. You can handle a little setback. I slammed a folder onto the table, the receipts and screenshots spilling out. This isn't a little setback. This is theft. I paid for that PC with my own money. You had no right. Amy snorted, not even looking up from her phone. Relax, Ben. It's just a computer. I felt my jaw clench. No, Amy. It's not just a computer. It's my livelihood, my work, my future. I've been making money with that setup, and now you've taken that away from me without a second thought. Dad finally set his tablet down, his eyes narrowing. Watch your tone, young man. You live under our roof, and everything in this house is ours, including that computer. I took a deep breath, my fists clenching under the table. That's not how it works, Dad. I'm not a kid anymore. That PC was mine, and you had no right to sell it without my permission. Either you pay me back or I'll take this further. Mom's face twisted into a frown. Don't threaten us. Ben, family sticks together. We did what was best for everyone. No. I shot back, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. You did what was best for Amy. I'm done being treated like a second-class citizen in my own home. With that, I turned and stormed out, leaving the table in stunned silence. My heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to them, and it felt terrifying, but it also felt good. Up in my room, I started packing. If they wanted to act like I didn't belong here, maybe it was time to prove them right. I fired off a quick text to Jake. Me, you still got that spare room in your apartment, Jake. Hell, yeah, bro. You thinking of moving out? Me, more like escaping. It was time for a change, and this time I wasn't looking back. Moving out was harder than I thought, but it also felt like the only way to reclaim my life. Over the next few days, I started quietly packing my things. I didn't want another dramatic showdown at the dinner table, I just wanted out. Jake came over one afternoon, his beat-up old truck parked out front with the engine still rumbling like an angry bear. He helped me load boxes while keeping an eye on the house, half expecting my parents to burst out and stop me. Man, this feels like a prison break. Jake chuckled, tossing a box of my books into the truck bed. You sure you're ready for this? Honestly? Yeah, I should have done this a long time ago. As we loaded the last of my gear, I took a final look at my room. The bare desk, the empty walls, the mattress stripped of its sheets. It felt like a ghost town, a place I'd already started forgetting. I left a short, blunt note on my pillow. Just a few lines explaining that I needed to focus on my work and my future. I didn't want a confrontation, and I definitely didn't want another lecture about family loyalty. As Jake pulled away from the curb, I watched my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror, the morning sun glaring off the windows like a spotlight on a stage I was finally stepping off. The first night in Jake's apartment felt surreal. His place was a cramped one-bedroom unit, above a noisy pizza joint, the kind of place that smelled like garlic and fryer oil. 24/7, but it felt more like home than my parents' house had in years. We set up my new makeshift workstation in the corner of the living room. Jake even offered me his old monitor until I could afford a replacement. "Consider it a housewarming gift," he said, clinking his beer bottle against mine as we collapsed onto the couch. "Thanks, man. I owe you one." "Nah, you just owe me a few wins in our next tournament." That first week was chaotic. I scrambled to make up for lost freelance gigs, reaching out to old clients and pulling late nights to rebuild my portfolio. My laptop was a slow, groaning dinosaur, but it got the job done. For now. My parents' texts started rolling in after the first day. At first, they were just confused. "Mom. Where are you? Dad? Why is your room empty, Mom?" This isn't funny, Ben. By the third day, the tone shifted. "Mom. You're being immature. This isn't how you handle family problems, Dad. If you don't come back and apologize, don't bother coming back at all." I ignored them. I knew they were just trying to reel me back in, guilt-trip me into returning to the role of the obedient son. But I was done playing that part. Then a few days later, Amy chimed in. "Amy, wow, you really left over a computer." "Grow up," I almost replied, but then I thought about her smug face in that new dress, her complete indifference to my struggle, and I set my phone down. Instead, I wasn't going to waste my energy on someone who never cared about me unless it benefited her. One night, as I was struggling to meet a client deadline on my clunky laptop, Jake popped his head out of his bedroom, his headset still on, gaming chair squeaking as he leaned back. "Hey, you know, you could start streaming again, right? You've got the skills." People love underdog stories. I hesitated. I hadn't streamed in months, not since my old rig had been gutted for Amy's shopping spree. But the idea sparked something in me. A challenge, a way to prove that I could stand on my own without my parents' help. "Yeah, maybe I should," I said, tapping the edge of my desk. The next morning, I started setting up my streaming channel again, dusting off my old overlays and graphics, tweaking my branding. I put together a few highlight reels from past games, hoping to catch some traction. To my surprise, it worked. Within a few days, my viewership started picking up and my chat was alive with messages. It felt good. A little chaotic, a little nerve-wracking, but good. Then just as I was starting to feel like I might actually pull this off, I got a text from my mom that stopped me cold. "Mom, if you're not coming back, then we need to talk about the rent you owe us for all those years you lived at home." I nearly dropped my phone. Rent. They had never once mentioned rent. If anything, I'd been the one paying for my own gear, chipping in for groceries and picking up extra chores whenever they needed me. I felt my jaw tighten, my pulse spiking. They wanted to hit me with a guilt trip fine? Two could play at that game. I took a deep breath, opened my laptop and started drafting a response. I included every expense I had covered over the years, every sacrifice I had made, every moment they had taken me for granted. It was time to settle the score. I hit send on that message to my mom, leaning back in my chair as the laptop's cooling fan whined like an old car engine. It felt good, satisfying even to finally put everything in writing. Every forgotten birthday, every stolen opportunity, every time they chose Amy's whims over my hard work. I watched the three little dots appear on the screen as my mom typed a response, then disappear, then reappear. She was clearly struggling with what to say, probably trying to figure out how to twist this back on me, how to make me feel guilty. A few minutes later, her message came through. "Mom, that's not fair, Ben. We did what we thought was best for the family. Amy just needed a little more support." A little more support. I felt my jaw tighten. That's all it ever was with them, bending over backward for Amy while I got the scraps. I slammed my laptop shut, my mind racing. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their toxic cycle. That night, I sat down with Jake over a couple of greasy pizzas and a few too many energy drinks. "Man, they're not going to stop," I said, taking a swig of soda. "They're just going to keep pushing, trying to guilt-trip me back into that house." Jake leaned back, his eyes narrowing in thought. "Then don't just defend, dude. Hit back." "What do you mean?" "I mean, make them regret messing with you. You're good at this stuff. You built that rig, you know? Tech, use it." I felt a spark ignite in my chest, that familiar rush of adrenaline I got whenever I faced a tough match in a tournament. He was right. I'd been too focused on surviving, on just getting by, when I should have been fighting back. The next morning, I woke up with a plan buzzing in my head. I spent hours drafting a detailed breakdown of every expense I had covered while living at home, from groceries to utilities to Wi-Fi bills. I even threw in the cost of the parts for my PC, the one they sold without a second thought. I attached it all to an email complete with a stern, professional tone that made it clear I wasn't playing around anymore. Subject: financial reconciliation, unpaid contributions. Dear Mom and Dad, since you've decided to bring up my supposed debt for living at home, I think it's only fair we consider this matter in full. Please find attached a comprehensive list of my financial contributions to the household over the past several years, including shared expenses, unpaid labor, and personal sacrifices made to support this family. Given this, I expect either a refund for my lost equipment or a formal apology for the years of overlooked support I have provided. Sincerely, Ben. I hit send, then leaned back, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. If they wanted to turn this into a financial war, I'd meet them on that battlefield. The next few days passed in a blur. My streaming channel started gaining traction, the view counts climbing steadily with each session. I even managed to pick up a few sponsorship deals, small ones but enough to cover my share of the rent and groceries. Then the bombshell hit. My dad called. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but then I took a deep breath and answered. Ben, his voice came through the line stiff and cold. Your mother and I got your email. Yeah, I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. This is ridiculous. You can't seriously expect us to pay you back for living in our house? I'm not asking for anything more than what I'm owed. I shot back. You took my property without permission. You sold something I worked years to build without even asking me. You think I'm just gonna let that slide? There was a long, tense silence. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. Fine, he said, his voice strained. We'll talk about this when you come home. I'm not coming back, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You made your choice when you sold my PC for Amy's shopping spree. I've moved on and you should too. Another pause, this one even longer. You're being unreasonable, he said finally. You're throwing away your family over a piece of plastic and metal. No. Dad, I said, my fist clenching at my sides. I'm walking away from years of being taken for granted, of being the afterthought in my own home. This isn't about the computer, it's about respect. Before he could respond, I ended the call and tossed my phone onto my desk, my heart racing. It felt like a small victory, like a piece of myself I had reclaimed. That night, Jake and I celebrated with cheap beer and a few rounds of our favorite FPS. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again, like the weight of my family's expectations had finally been lifted. But I knew this wasn't over. My parents weren't the type to just let things go. They'd be back, and when they were, I needed to be ready. As I lay in bed that night, the neon glow of my desk lights casting a soft, calming hue across the room, I made a promise to myself. No more backing down, no more compromises. If my family wanted a war, I'd give them one. The days after that call were a whirlwind. My streaming channel continued to grow, each new subscriber and donation a small defiant middle finger to my parents' idea that my work was just playing games. I was finally gaining momentum, carving out my own path, and it felt incredible. But my parents weren't done yet. They ramped up their attempts to drag me back into their orbit. The texts and missed calls kept coming, my phone buzzing constantly with a mix of guilt trips and demands. Mom, you need to come home so we can talk about this face to face, Dad. You're being childish, Ben. Family is more important than money. Amy, LOL. You're seriously still mad about that computer? Grow up. I ignored them, focusing instead on my work, but the constant noise started to wear me down. It felt like I was fighting a battle on two fronts, building my new life while constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next round of manipulation. Then one evening, as I was wrapping up a stream, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Known. Hey, it's Ethan. I heard what happened. Just wanted to say I'm on your side, man. Let me know if you need anything. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Ethan had been a friend from high school, someone who had always had my back even when my family didn't. I shot him a quick reply. Me, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's been a rough few weeks. Ethan. I figured if you ever need to crash at my place, just say the word. It felt good to know that I still had people in my corner. For the first time in a while, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. Then, just when I thought things were starting to stabilize, my parents pulled their boldest move yet. One afternoon, as I was grinding through a client's design project, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Jake, dude, check your email. Your parents just sent a mass message to everyone in the family. I frowned, my stomach twisting as I clicked over to my email. Sure enough, there it was. A long, passive-aggressive email from my mom sent to every aunt, uncle, cousin, and grandparent in our extended family. Subject: family update. Concern for our son. Dear family, it is with a heavy heart that we share this message. Our son Ben has chosen to distance himself from his family over a misunderstanding about a piece of technology. We have always supported him, provided for him, and loved him unconditionally, but he has decided to walk away, cutting ties with us without warning. We only ask for your prayers and support as we try to bring our family back together. We hope that one day Ben will see that family is more important than any material possession. Love, Mark and Linda. I felt my face heat up, my pulse pounding in my ears. They had just tried to flip the entire narrative, painting themselves as the loving, misunderstood parents and me as the ungrateful, rebellious son. Jake must have seen my online status go dark because he called me immediately. "Dude, you good?" he asked as soon as I picked up. "Did you read that email?" I spat, my hands shaking. "They're trying to make me look like the villain. They just made it sound like I walked out for no reason." "Yeah, I saw it. It's a classic move, man. Control the narrative, make themselves the victims. They're trying to cut you off from the rest of the family." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This was a new low even for them. They weren't just trying to guilt trip me back home. They were trying to isolate me, turn the entire family against me. "All right," I said, my voice tight with barely contained rage. "Two can play this game." That night, I drafted my own response. I kept it short, factual, and to the point, refusing to let my emotions bleed into the message. Subject: setting the record straight. Dear family, I appreciate your concern, but I want to clarify the situation. My decision to move out was not made lightly. For years, I have contributed to the household, financially invested in my own career, and worked to build a future for myself. My parents sold my personal property without my consent, dismissing my hard work and financial independence as insignificant. I am not cutting ties with family. I am simply choosing to respect myself and my efforts. I hope you can understand my perspective. Best, Ben. I hit send and watched as the message slipped into the digital ether, my hands still shaking. For a while, the responses were mixed. Some of my cousins reached out, offering quiet words of support. Others, clearly swayed by my parents' version of events, simply ghosted me. It hurt, but I was prepared for this. Then, a few days later, I got another message from Ethan. "Ethan, bro, your parents are blowing up the family group chat. They're freaking out about your email. I think you hit a nerve." I felt a flicker of satisfaction. I had stood my ground, refused to let them control the narrative, and it had thrown them off balance. I took a deep breath, leaning back in my chair as my PC hummed quietly beside me, the soft glow of the screen casting long shadows across my small, messy apartment. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back, reclaiming my life one small victory at a time. The fallout from my email hit like a grenade. Within hours, I started getting messages from aunts, uncles, and even a few cousins who hadn't bothered to reach out in years. Some were sympathetic, offering vague words of support. Others clearly still drinking the family loyalty. Kool-Aid sent thinly veiled accusations, calling me ungrateful or warning me about burning bridges. But one message stood out. It was from my Uncle Matt, my dad's younger brother. He had always been the black sheep of the family, the one who ran his own business, traveled the world, and never cared much for family politics. "Matt, just read your email. I get it. Don't let them drag you down. If you need a job or a place to crash, my door is always open." I felt a rush of gratitude. I hadn't seen Matt in years, but knowing that at least one person in my family understood my side meant a lot. I shot him a quick reply thanking him for his support and promised to catch up soon. As the weeks went by, my streaming channel continued to grow. I poured everything I had into it, investing the few dollars I made back into better gear and promotional tools. I even started branching out into YouTube, cutting my streams into highlight reels and adding sarcastic commentary that my viewers seemed to love. The grind was exhausting, but for the first time in years, I felt free. I was building something for myself, something my parents couldn't take away on a whim. Then one night, just as I was about to go live, my phone buzzed with a message from Amy. "Amy, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the block button. What could she possibly have to say to me now? But curiosity got the better of me, and I replied, "Me about what?" "Amy, I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. Mom and Dad are a mess right now. They keep blaming you for everything." I clenched my jaw, my heart beating faster. "Me? So that's their problem, not mine." "Amy, I know I didn't think it would end up like this." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound echoing off the walls of my tiny apartment. She was only reaching out now because the weight of our parents' mess had finally started to crack her perfect little world. "Me. Maybe you should have thought about that before you let them sell my PC. There was a long pause before her next message. Amy, I didn't know they were going to do that. I just mentioned that you didn't use it as much anymore. I didn't think they'd actually sell it. My fists tightened. So, she had planted the seed? Whispered the idea in their ears and then watched as they tore down everything I'd worked for, all without a second thought. Me? You're unbelievable. Amy, I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't mean for this to happen. I felt my pulse spike, my anger flaring again. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about the computer. It was about years of being overlooked, underestimated, and taken for granted. Me, sorry doesn't cut it. Amy, I'm done with this family drama. I've moved on. You should too. I hit send and immediately blocked her number, my heart racing. I didn't need her half-hearted apologies, her attempts to drag me back into the toxic mess I had just escaped from. The next morning, I woke up to another barrage of missed calls and voicemails from my parents. I didn't bother listening to them. Instead, I focused on my stream, throwing myself into my work with a renewed sense of purpose. Then about a week later, I got a text from my uncle Matt. Matt, hey, just a heads up. Your parents reached out to me. They're asking for money. I nearly dropped my phone. My parents, who had always prided themselves on their financial stability, were now reaching out to the family black sheep for a handout. Matt. They're claiming they need help covering some unexpected expenses. I'm guessing that's code for, we blew all our money on Amy's shopping spree. I couldn't help but laugh. The irony was too perfect. They had sold my PC, my one lifeline, to fund Amy's high school fantasy, and now they were the ones struggling to make ends meet. I shot Matt a quick reply. Me, thanks for the heads up. Don't give them a dime. They made their bed, let them lie in it. Matt's response came a few minutes later, a simple thumbs up emoji followed by, Matt, proud of you for standing your ground, kid. Don't let them pull you back in. I set my phone down, leaning back in my chair as the neon lights of my setup bathed the room in a cool, calming glow. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Free from the expectations, the guilt, and the constant grinding pressure to put my family first. I had my own path now, my own goals, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. As I went live that night, my chat lighting up with greetings from my growing community, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the heat from my PC. I had chosen myself for once, and it felt incredible. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Story 2. Without hesitation, I called off the wedding in front of everyone after my fiancée and her parents made fun of my late mother in public during the rehearsal dinner. I'm 33 years old, and until recently I was engaged to Lydia, whom I genuinely believed I would be with for the rest of my life. She and I met at a barbecue around 6 years ago through mutual acquaintances. She was quick with a joke, had a wonderful grin, and we bonded. A year ago, I made the decision to pop the question without hesitation. It seemed like the right person at the right moment. I wasn't simply getting married to Lydia at the moment. In a sense, I was marrying her family as well. Jack and Dana. Her parents are the type of individuals who enjoy being the focus of attention. They appear to have something to say about everything, are noisy, and have strong opinions. I initially believed it was simply their attitude, but as time went on, I began to notice how their entitlement permeated every aspect of their lives. Let me talk about my mom before we get into what happened. She was the greatest person I had ever met, and her name was Patricia. After 3 grueling years of fighting cancer, she passed away 2 years ago. It was inspiring to see her overcome the illness, and yet find ways to prioritize others. I learned a lot from her about being nice, giving, and sticking up for what's right. In addition to being my pillar of support, my mother was a lifeline to many others. She had the ability to jump in and assist others without making them feel guilty or obligated. It was as if she just carried out her duties in silence. That also applied to Lydia's relatives. The way that Jack and Donna talk about her today belies how much they owe her. It went okay. Enough when I initially presented Lydia to my mother. Lydia was liked by my mother. Lydia appeared courteous, and she told me so. However, it became clear that Lydia and my mother didn't get along as things became more serious. Little remarks here and there, such as Lydia calling my mom too interested or a bit too willing to assist, were all that was going on. Nothing spectacular. Although it annoyed me, I assumed it was either Lydia's anxieties or her attempt to fit in with a new family. The problem is that years ago, when Lydia's family's business was about to close, my mom did a lot for them. In order to assist them, my mother co-signed a loan. My mother had faith in them, but no one else would take that chance. She even assisted them in arranging their money and creating a strategy to turn the company around. And it was successful. Jack and Donna were able to maintain their livelihood and the restaurant survived, but things didn't end there. They lacked the funds to fix their restaurant's industrial oven when it malfunctioned. Because she didn't want them to lose business, my mom paid for it in full. She might have subsequently used the money to pay for her own medical costs, but she never requested a refund. She was simply that. Ryan, Lydia's elder brother, came next. He was having trouble finishing college because he was unable to pay for his final semester's tuition. In order to prevent him from having to drop out, my mom stepped in and paid for it. "One thing that no one can take away from you," she remarked, "is knowledge." She donated more than simply cash. It was energy and time, from giving bookkeeping guidance to watching Ryan's children so he could concentrate on his studies. She devoted hours to assisting Lydia's family. And I'll tell you, Ryan, Dana, and Jack never gave her a sincere thank you. They did express gratitude in passing, but they didn't truly recognize what she had done for them. But that never mattered to my mother. The recognition wasn't her motivation. Her only goal was to assist others. I was devastated when my mother died. She was everything to me, so losing her was like losing a permanent part of who I was when I needed Lydia the most. She was there for me, or I believed that she was. Looking back, I saw that she was more concerned with doing the bare minimum to get her support. "You should move on," she would say, "because your mother wouldn't want you to be mired in sorrow." It didn't feel reassuring, even though it might have been true. It sounded contemptuous. I began to see more warning signs in the run-up to the wedding. Lydia was strangely contemptuous. Anytime I brought up my mom in conversations about the ceremony, for example, I wanted to include a small tribute to my mom during the vows, and Lydia just brushed it off, saying, "Isn't that going to make people sad? Weddings are supposed to be happy." I let it slide because I didn't want to start a fight, but little things like that kept piling up. Then there were the comments from Jack and Dana. They had this way of talking down to me, like they thought Lydia was marrying beneath her. Jack once joked about how Lydia was upgrading her life by marrying someone from a simpler background. Dana would say things like, "Well, we all make sacrifices for love," as if Lydia was doing me a favor by agreeing to marry me. It stung, but I kept my mouth shut for Lydia's sake. Looking back now, I wish I'd spoken up sooner. Maybe I could have saved myself some heartache, but I kept telling myself that once the wedding was over and the dust settled, things would get better. I couldn't have been more wrong. So fast forward to about a month before the wedding. That's when things really started to unravel. Like I said earlier, Lydia's parents, Jack and Dana, offered to host the rehearsal dinner at this fancy restaurant. They had relations too. At first, I thought it was a sweet gesture. I assumed maybe they were attempting to smooth over all the small, nasty comments and awkward moments we'd had during the wedding preparations. I even persuaded myself maybe this is their way of stepping up and displaying some class. Now, a little context regarding this supper. Lydia's parents didn't just volunteer to host it. They made a huge show of how generous they were being. Donna kept bringing it up in talks like, "Well, we've put so much time into making this rehearsal dinner wonderful. It's going to be the talk of the town." Jack, of course, weighed in every time he could, reminding me and everyone else that the restaurant was one of the best in the region and how we were happy they were able to acquire it. The whole event started to feel less like a gift and more like an ego boost for them. But whatever, I was focused on making the wedding happen, so I let them take the reins on the rehearsal dinner. Big error. As we moved closer to the day, Jack and Donna's true colors started to peek through even more. Every discussion with them devolved into a backhanded remark or passive-aggressive statement. For instance, Donna rolled her eyes and muttered, "We'll take care of it, Michael," when I attempted to verify the dinner's guest list. "You don't have to worry about the specifics. Simply turn up and have fun." Even though it was a little issue, I found it bothersome because this was meant to be our celebration, right? Lydia and I ought to be able to choose who attends. Then the menu appeared. Donna made a big deal out of the fact that they were planning a fancy dinner for the evening. "Oh, we have the chef to create something really special," she said again. "It's not at all like what you'd often find at home, Michael." Back home, that final section was her favorite dig. She enjoyed reminding me that I didn't belong to their social group. I was raised in a modest working-class town, and I will always remember it. I made an effort to ignore it and concentrate on the wider picture. "It's only one night," I reminded myself. Nod and smile and go on. Even Lydia, though, was beginning to behave strangely. Although she had always sided with her parents, she became even more so in the weeks before the dinner. She would dismiss any thoughts or worries I raised, saying, "Michael, you're overanalyzing this. My folks are skilled at what they do. It wasn't just about the supper, though. The way they made me feel alienated in my own relationship was the cause. They acted as though I was fortunate to be present, as if I should be thankful that Lydia agreed to marry me. She never defended me. A week before the meal, I attempted to bring it up, but she either laughed along with it or ignored me, so if anything, she encouraged it. For me, this particular instance should have raised serious concerns. I was at Lydia's parents' house with her. Complete a few wedding-related details, like she was organizing a royal celebration. Donna was in complete control as she flipped through flower arrangements and seating maps. I once suggested that the centerpieces be changed to something more straightforward, something my mother would have approved of. Donna never even raised her head from her binder. "Oh, Patricia had interesting taste, didn't she?" she remarked. "However, this is Lydia's day. Shall we keep things up to date?" I went cold. Despite being so slight, the jab had a powerful effect on me. Lydia remained silent. As if nothing had happened, she continued to go through her phone. I didn't want to create a quarrel, but I wanted to call Donna out at that very moment. I kept my mouth shut and swallowed my pride. I regret not saying something when I think about it. I kept ignoring it because I didn't want to upset anyone, even though it seemed like every slight and insult added up. I believed I was maintaining harmony. I could clearly sense the strain in the air on the day of the rehearsal dinner. I attempted to lighten the situation by striking up a conversation with Lydia as we drove to the restaurant, but she was silent, paging through her phone and hardly answering. "It's just a dinner, Michael." She shrugged when I asked whether she was excited. "Don't worry, it's only dinner." Jack and Donna were already in the restaurant, acting as like they owned it when we arrived. Donna was busy instructing the workers while Jack stood at the door shaking hands with visitors as they entered. It all seemed less like a family get-together and more like a business function. The restaurant itself was all decked out with extravagant chandeliers and white tablecloths. "Look how important we are" was the type of place that shouted. To be honest, that only made me feel more uncomfortable. I began to notice something strange as the people began to arrive. Lydia's side of the family made up the majority of the attendees. My sister, dad, and a few close friends and family members were among the 3 or 4 individuals from my side. All the others were either Lydia's parents or relatives' business partners. They seemed to have transformed the rehearsal dinner into a social gathering. I asked Lydia what was happening after dragging her apart. "Why don't more members of my family attend?" I said, "Your family is small, Michael," she replied, looking at me impatiently. In some way, my parents had to fill the space. "It's not really important." "Not a huge concern?" Her response to everything was that I bit my tongue and resumed socializing, but I couldn't get rid of the impression that we weren't the focus of this evening. It was about Jack and Dana flaunting themselves. They had taken what was meant to be a celebration of our love and made it into a performance for themselves. Following the meal, the remarks were introduced by the main event. Naturally, Jack was the first to get up. Instead of discussing his daughter's wedding, he seized the microphone as if he were delivering a major speech at a conference. He began by saying, "Welcome, everyone," after clearing his throat. "We are celebrating the joining of 2 families tonight, our Lydia and Michael, of course." It seemed to leave a foul taste in his mouth as he mentioned my name. Every word he said was a carefully veiled insult, and I was sitting there trying not to get upset. He began by expressing his pride in Lydia and how she has always been the family's star. She has always been aware of her goals in life and pursued them. She is now getting married to a man who will help her stay grounded. When he said it, he grinned, and I swear a few people laughed. I simply gazed at him, unsure whether I had understood correctly. He then started telling this story about Lydia, who was always a high achiever, even as a child, and how having their advice helped her stay on course. "We've always taught Lydia to aim high," he said at one point. Even though Michael wasn't initially what we had in mind, he trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging as if it were meant to be humorous. From the other side of the table, I could sense my sister and father scowling at him. Donna came next, like she was going to accept an award. She strode to the microphone. Her speech got off to a decent start. She expressed her love for Lydia and her excitement for the wedding. However, she then began to make small jabs about me. "It's a good thing she's patient because she's taught Michael so much already," she said, describing Lydia as the ideal daughter who deserved the best in life. My water nearly choked me. What had I learned from Lydia? How I had to keep my mouth shut while her parents made fun of me whenever they could. "We're so happy to welcome you into the family." "Michael," Donna said, turning to face me. Finally, having someone who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty will be nice, won't it? A few of her family members joined in on her laughter. I looked at Lydia expecting her to intervene or at least appear uneasy, but she was grinning with them. And right when I believed things couldn't get any worse, Jack returned to the microphone. "One final thing before we wrap this up," he said, clinking his glass. "I just wanted to give credit to someone who is no longer with us, but who greatly influenced Michael's development. Patricia, his mother. I had a fleeting hope that he would say something nice, but he didn't. Rather, he claimed that Patricia was unique. Didn't she have a tendency to put herself in awkward situations, always held a view on the proper way to do things?" Donna added to his laughter. "Oh, she obviously had strong ideas. Remember how she constantly insisted on assisting us even when we didn't ask? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were talking about my mom like she was some nosy neighbor." Jack wasn't done, but in all seriousness, he added, "Patricia was a generous woman. She helped us out a lot. Sometimes too much, if I'm being honest." He winked like it was some kind of private joke. The room went silent, but Jack simply kept talking. "We'll be sure to keep her spirit alive during the wedding. Let's hope Michael doesn't inherit her zest for taking charge, though. We wouldn't want him meddling too much, right?" That was it. My cheeks became heated, and I tightened my hands beneath the table. I looked at Lydia, hoping she would say something to stop them, but all she did was giggle and say, "Oh, Dad, stop," as if it were innocent fun. Harmless enjoyment. Lydia found it amusing that they were making fun of my mother's memories in front of a large crowd. It seemed unbelievable to me. The fact that Jack and Dana pretended to be charming was the worst part. Their expressions were cocky, as if they believed that everyone was laughing with them. I could tell that wasn't the case, though, when I looked around the room. At last, Jack took a seat. You could cut through the tension in the room with a knife as people clumsily attempted to get past the train disaster of a speech. The clinking of glasses and forks began once again. "Are you okay?" Lydia murmured, leaning over. She spoke in an informal tone as if she were inquiring whether I wanted more water. Not while I was fuming with anger. I didn't even give her a glance. I simply nodded, while clenching my jaw so firmly that I was afraid my teeth would break. Dana then approached our table nevertheless. "I hope you weren't offended, Michael," she added softly. "All Jack and I wanted to do was inject some comedy into the event. All of this is for fun." Something suddenly struck me at that moment. I was unable to remain silent any longer. With a loud scrape of my chair on the floor, I got up. "Are you serious now?" I spoke in a low voice that was trembling with rage. So there I was, still a little tilted back from when I got up, standing in the center of the rehearsal dinner chair. There was a complete silence in the room, as if the television had been muted. I didn't care that everyone was watching me. My cheeks felt flushed and my heart was racing. However, I knew I couldn't ignore this. It was already too much when Jack and Dana made fun of my mother. However, Donna's phony apologies was the last straw. "Are you serious now?" I said it again, staring at Dana. She probably didn't think I was going to call her out since she froze for a moment. As if I had just insulted him? Jack looked up from his glass. "Sitting behind me?" Lydia said, "Michael, please stop." However, I disregarded her. Speaking louder now, I continued. "Let me get this straight. My mother, who provided for your family when no one else would, was the target of your cheap shots throughout the night. You're now behaving as though it was a joke. Do you think that's acceptable?" Jack folded his arms and reclined in his chair. He smirked as if this were no great issue and continued. "Relax, Michael. You're going overboard. All of it was amusing." "Fun," I fired back. "She meddled, you said. She was too much, you claimed. You made fun of her generosity as if it were a weakness. How was that enjoyable experience?" There was too much tension in the room. I noticed some of Lydia's cousins obviously uncomfortable staring down at their plates. In contrast, my dad was looking at Jack as if he wanted to strike him, with her arms folded. My sister was staring at Dana as if she was waiting for her moment to speak. Dana made an effort to laugh it off. "Don't be too touchy. Michael, all we were doing was telling stories. Patricia's tendency to take the lead is well known. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Take charge?" I urged, raising my voice. "Did she assist you? You were on the verge of losing your business, but she salvaged it. She covered your son's college tuition, your patio renovation, and the repairs for your oven. And you pay her back like this by making her into a joke over a rehearsal dinner." Jack sat up more erect, obviously irritated. He tried to seem authoritative as he remarked, All right, that's enough. We didn't intend any harm, but perhaps you're not ready for marriage if you're going to act out about it. His lack of regard for me was evident in his remark. Or really for my mother. At last, Lydia raised her voice, grabbing my sleeve. Please, let's go outside and chat, Michael. I withdrew my arm. Lydia, no. We are unable to. Not until your parents realize how rude they have been. Donna let out a loud sigh as if she were the victim of the whole situation. This should be a joyous moment, Michael. Everyone's evening is being ruined by you. The evening is being ruined by me. My voice trembled with rage as I spoke. You wrecked it. Donna, you simply sat there and let it happen the moment you made the decision to disparage my mom in front of Lydia and everyone else. Lydia's cheeks flushed. She added defensively, I didn't know they were going to say all that. However you chuckled, I fired back. You chuckled at every slight. At this point, you didn't even attempt to stop them. The room began to fill with murmurs. People were whispering to one another about what was happening in front of them. Their glances weighed heavily on me, but I didn't mind. This has nothing to do with them. This was about defending my mother. Jack sprang to his feet, obviously frustrated. Okay, Michael, you might want to go. If you're so insulted. Pointing to the door, he said. I thought about that for a moment. I considered simply allowing them to have their ideal little meal. However, I turned to face my father, and the few friends who had come to encourage me. They were all observing, anticipating my next move. I also came to the realization that I couldn't allow Jack and Donna to get away with it. Not now. No, I answered firmly. I'm not going anywhere. Not until you realize your mistake, Jack started to reply, but I interrupted him. You pretend to be a controlling busybody, yet you wouldn't even have this restaurant connection if it weren't for my mom. She didn't do any of it in order to get admiration or notoriety. She cared. Therefore, she took action. And now, as if it were a joke, you're sitting here disparaging her memory. It's more than just rude, it's repulsive. The room fell silent once again. Even Jack was surprised, as if he was unsure of how to react. Donna's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Lydia simply sat there looking at the table with a mixture of rage and humiliation on her face. We didn't intend it that way, Jack mumbled at the end. I said, it doesn't matter how you meant it. How it comes across is what counts. You don't have the right to change my mother's identity merely to fit your story. That was not fair to her. To be honest, I do too. I then moved away from the table and picked up my coat. Do you want me to go? All right. But don't count on me to return. My father got up right away and prepared to go with me. Before joining us, my sister took her handbag and gave Donna a last sneer. A few of my pals, uncertain but encouraging, stood up to the scrutiny. I was called after by Lydia Holt on Michael. I didn't stop, though. After leaving that eatery, I left. Despite my heart thumping in my chest, I kept my head up. My dad touched my shoulder outside. You made the correct decision, he remarked. Your mother would be pleased. I didn't feel proud, but I nodded. I came to a realization and felt deceived and outraged. Perhaps she wasn't who I believed her to be if she couldn't defend my mother or myself. A part of me felt that leaving was the proper thing to do, but another part of me kept thinking that it wasn't enough. Lydia and her family would just fabricate a tale to paint me as the villain if I kept things as they were. They would portray it as my overreacting or being overly sensitive. I couldn't allow that to occur. It was more than just me. It was about my mother, her memories, and my values. I inhaled deeply before turning to face my father. I responded, I have to go back in there. What? Blurt out. My sister said. Why? There is nothing that you owe them. Looking at her, I continued, I know, but I'm not going to leave this unfinished. Lydia, her parents, and everyone else need to know that I'm done for good. After hesitating, my dad nodded. I'll support you if that's what you need to do. I shook my head, saying, no, I'm going to have to do this myself. Despite her apparent want to dispute, my sister refrained from speaking. I pivoted and made my way back to the eatery. My intellect was clear, but my gut was in knots. I had no intention of making a scene by going back in there. I was making my way back inside to put a definitive end to everything. As I returned inside, I noticed that people were stealing looks at the door and muttering to one another. Lydia remained seated at the table, her eyes wide and her face pallid. She got up when she spotted me. What are you doing, Michael? She said. I chose to disregard her query and proceeded directly to the front of the room where Jack and Donna were still seated and appeared overly confident. As I walked up, Jack arched an eyebrow. Obviously, they didn't think I would return. Donna smiled at me with the same phony, lovely grin she had been wearing all evening. Returning so quickly, Jack said in a tone that was brimming with irony. I didn't even try to answer him. Instead, I looked around the room. I exclaimed loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, "Excuse me, everyone!" The muttering abruptly ceased, and everyone's attention was once again on me. Despite my racing heart, I spoke steadily. I must express something. I turned to look at Lydia, who was now still beside the table with her fists clenched in front of her. After what occurred tonight, I don't see the need to wait, even though I know that this isn't the time or location that anybody was expecting. I inhaled deeply and went on. "The wedding is off!" The room exploded. People turned to one another, and the air was filled with gasps, whispers, and the scrape of chairs. Lydia's hands sprang to her lips and her jaw fell. "Michael." "No," she muttered. But I stopped her with a hand gesture. There was utter silence in the room. Even the waiters were now still standing motionless in the room's corners. I looked back at the other visitors. "This goes beyond tonight. I said I would be married into a family like this. A family that doesn't regard my mother, myself, or the principles I was brought up with. I cannot and will not live my entire life in such a manner." At last, Jack was able to speak. With a tone full of derision, he replied, "You're making a big mistake, kid. A nice item is being thrown away for nothing." I gave a sour laugh. "Nothing? You believe that insulting my mother is insignificant? Do you believe it is insignificant to treat me as though I am less than a... Jack, going through with this wedding and binding myself to a family that doesn't deserve me would be a mistake." Donna appeared on the verge of tears. Perhaps she was simply humiliated by the failure of their small presentation. "Michael," she replied in a tremulous voice. "We should refrain from making hasty decisions. When everyone has had a chance to calm down, we can discuss this tomorrow." "No," I answered firmly. "This is not something we will discuss tomorrow or ever again. This is finished." For the final time, I looked at Lydia. Tears were streaming down her cheeks and she appeared unsure of whether to shout or plead. My footsteps reverberated in the quiet room as I made my way back toward the entrance. Lydia called after me one final time as I went for the handle. "Please don't do this, Michael." I hesitated for a second. I responded, "I already did," after placing my hand on the door and turning around. The feeling of leaving the restaurant was like tearing off a band-aid. Indeed, there was a sting, but the predominant sensation was one of relief. The wedding was the reason, the sense of inferiority in a family and the ongoing contempt I was meant to go along. It was everything behind me. The actual repercussions started the next morning. My phone had over 100 unread texts when I woke up. Lydia was home to the majority of them. Some belonged to Jack and Donna, and a couple even came from unidentified family members of her that I didn't really know. The messages' tones varied from begging to downright hostile. Lydia apologized profusely in her texts. "I apologize. I didn't want to do you any harm. Michael, just talk to me, please." Jax acted more violently. "You made us seem foolish in front of everyone. This is something you'll regret." Donna, too. She made an effort to act like the victim. "It's unbelievable that you would do this to Lydia. This was not fair to her." I disregarded them all. Lydia arrived at my flat around the middle of the day. I anticipated it. It wasn't any easier, even though I had been preparing for it all day. She didn't appear to have slept when I opened the door. Her face was smeared with tears and her eyes were crimson. It appeared as though she had gone straight home and sobbed herself to sleep because she was still wearing the outfit from the previous evening. She said softly, her voice trembling, "Michael, could we please have a conversation?" I leaned against the doorframe with my arms folded. "Lydia, what's there to discuss?" Last night I was rather explicit. She recoiled, like if I had given her a smack, yet she refused to give up. She remarked, "I understand that you're upset and you have every right to be. However, we can resolve this. We, can resolve it." I gave a head shake. "Do you not understand? There's no way we can just solve this." I was afraid. "Okay," she murmured, wiping her eyes with the back of her palm while her voice cracked. "I had no idea what to do." "What are you afraid of?" My irritation boiled over as I asked, "Fearful of causing your parents distress. Fearful of creating a commotion." She had nothing to say. I waited for anything as she simply stood there in tears. Anything that would give me the impression that she truly realized what she had done. However, nothing appeared. She stepped closer as her eyes grew wide. Michael, please, she muttered. Avoid doing this. We can figure things out. I'll speak with my folks. I'll force them to say sorry. Don't end it this way, please. Once more. I shook my head. Lydia, it's not only your parents, it concerns you. I can't stop seeing you since last night made it clear to me who you are. I'm worthy of better. Her expression crumpled as reality set in. As she gazed at me for a while, I spent a Saturday afternoon organizing my mother's old treasure box. From the moment she died, I had clung to it. Her favorite necklace, a set of earrings she wore to church, and a little delicate locket containing a photo of my grandmother were among the items found inside. The locket had been handed down from mother to daughter for generations and had been given to me by my mother before she died away. You'll know the appropriate person to give this to one day, she added. Since then, I've stored it securely in the box. It was more than a simple piece of jewelry. It was a part of our family's past and of her. However, the locket was missing. When I opened the package that day, I initially believed I was having hallucinations. I meticulously went into every area of the box as I tore it apart. However, it was absent. I looked in the drawers where the box was stored, the shelves, and even the surrounding floor. Nothing. The knowledge made my heart sink. It had been stolen. Lydia was the only person other than my family and close friends who had lately visited my place. The process of piecing everything together made my stomach turn. A few days after the split, she would visit to deliver the engagement ring. I didn't give it much consideration when she requested to use the restroom before leaving, but suddenly it all made sense. I took out my phone and sent her a text. Has the locket been stolen from my mother's keepsake box? She responded a few minutes later. What are you discussing? It took me a while to believe it. You understand exactly what I mean. My mother left me the locket. It's gone. The only person who has visited my flat recently is you. Have you taken it? She took a while to reply, but when she did, her message infuriated me. I wanted to have a part of her with me, so I borrowed it. I hoped it would make me feel more connected to you. Borrowed. Without asking, she took it without even informing me. I was astounded by the boldness I gave her. A call right away. She sounded defensive when she answered the phone as if she were the victim in this whole situation. It's not a big deal, Michael, she added. I intended to return it. I snapped. It was not a huge deal. My family has owned that locket for many generations. It's not merely a souvenir you can grab whenever you want. What gave you the idea that was acceptable? She added, her voice quivering, as if she were attempting to play the compassion card. I just wanted to feel connected to you. I thought you wouldn't notice. I would notice, of course, I yelled. My mother owns it. It's made worse by the fact that you didn't thought to ask me first. That's when she began to weep. However, I had no desire to console her. What location is it? I insisted. She sobbed as she confessed that it was at my parents' place. I left it there for protection since I didn't want to lose it. The final straw was that you stole something that wasn't yours. Something you'll never know how much it means to me. You just dropped it off at your parents' place. Do you mean me? I apologize, she muttered. Sorry, it isn't enough, I responded in a chilly tone. I'm on my way to pick it up. I was arriving at Jack and Dana's place 1 hour later. The trip had just intensified my rage, and I was on the verge of blowing up by the time I knocked on the door. Donna pulled it open. When she noticed the expression on my face, her phony, lovely grin faded. With caution, she said, Michael, why are you here? I've come to get my mother's locket. I was direct. Lydia informed me, it's here. Donna's expression changed to one of perplexity and irritation. A locket was taken by Lydia. Why would she simply receive it? I cut you off. Despite her narrowed gaze, she moved aside to allow me to pass. Lydia returned downstairs a few minutes later with the lock in her hand. I didn't care that her face was blotchy and her eyes were crimson. The only thing I could see was the necklace hanging from her fingers as if there were no sounds. Hold it out to me, she said. When I was happy, I grabbed it out of her hand and checked to make sure it was the same one. After stuffing it inside my pocket, I turned to go. Oh, Michael, hold on, she cried in a terrified, frantic voice. It wasn't my intention to annoy you. All I wanted to do was rescue it. I interrupted her. I said, Connie, Lydia, she took from me. From my mother. As if your previous actions weren't sufficient. She broke down in tears as her face crumbled. I didn't stop, though. I slammed the door behind me as I left. I banned her phone number. In the days that followed, I erased her texts and blocked her from contacting me in any manner. I had had enough of her. My life was filled with turmoil from her relatives. This was the hardest part of calling off the wedding. The last nail in the coffin was this. Even while it was exhausting, it also seemed like a satisfying conclusion. I had defended myself, my mother, and the principles she had taught me. I felt at peace for the first time in a long time, and knew I had made the correct decision, Tori. 3. In order to take my house from my pregnant stepsister, my dad and stepmother changed my locks. However, their greatest dread came true when I retaliated. I am a 28-year-old man who lives alone in the house. 5 years ago, my mother died away and left me. It's a little 3-bedroom home in a peaceful area, comfortable yet not ostentatious. Above all, it comes from my mother. This is where she spent her entire life working. She also made sure I understood that it was intended to provide me with stability once she left. This residence is more than just a place to live. Her legacy is that. The only stable parent I had as a child was my mother. Despite her imperfections, she was always there for me. After the divorce, however, my dad dropped out. Let's just say, his priorities changed and he got married again really fast. He was constantly focused on his new bride, and her daughter Savannah, as we shall call her, received royal treatment. Now 25. Savannah is expecting a child. Her being pregnant doesn't bother me in the least. That isn't the problem. She's one of those people who believes the world owes her something, which is the problem. Since we were small, her parents have been stroking her ego. Savannah is able to acquire what she wants, whether it's a brand new vehicle, lavish trips, or other arbitrary items. She determines she desires. They go out of their way to make her happy. I want to complete. I have the attitude I have stayed away from all of it. I occasionally run into my dad. However, I've stated that I like my privacy. My home is a haven where I can live my life without anyone getting in the way. I have a simple routine, some excellent pals, and a respectable job. I'm steady, but I'm not making a lot of money. These days, that's more than many people can claim. I'm the only one in the home right now. Sincerely, I prefer it that way. No drama, no roommates, simply silent. Just what I needed when my mother died. Back to Savannah now. Her boyfriend Tyler broke up with her a few months ago. To be honest, that was obvious to me from the beginning. When things became serious, he always appeared to bail. However, Savannah didn't appear to be really upset about it. She went right back to her parents, according to what I've heard, and was pampered and treated again right away. They purchased her pregnancy supplies, cooked for her, and generally treated her as if she were a piece of glass. At first, I didn't give it much thought. I have no business dealing with that. However, my dad phones me out of the blue and says he wants to chat. Since he doesn't do this frequently, I reason that it must be significant. I go to their residence and I can sense right away that something is wrong. In an attempt to remind everyone that she is pregnant, Savannah is seated at the kitchen table with my dad and his wife massaging her tummy. They gave off the impression that they were delaying with some pointless small conversation. His wife nodded as if she cared when my dad inquired about how work was doing, but they quickly got to the point. With the impending baby, my dad began to complain that their house was too small and that Savannah needed a permanent place to live. His wife interrupted before I could reply. Her voice was piercing, yet cloaked in phony worry. "Well," she replied, "it just makes sense for Savannah to move in since you're living alone in that large house and you're not married or anything. You're not really committed to anything, and she needs room for the baby. For yourself, you might simply find something more manageable and smaller." It was not a recommendation. It was a proclamation. As if this was the plan already and all I had to do was follow it. As if conducting the research made their demand more fair. My dad added that they had even looked at a few apartments for me. It seemed unbelievable to me. They were yelling that my life didn't matter and were obviously giving me clues. Similar to my home, they could move people into my residence whenever it was convenient for them. The sense of entitlement was overpowering, as though I wasn't making the best use of my life or my house because I wasn't married or had children. I initially believed I may have misheard them. Who says such a thing, really? They were dead serious, though. It seems that they had been preparing this for some time and were simply waiting for the appropriate moment to bring it up. I was direct with them. Of course, this house is more than simply a piece of real estate to me. I call it home. It's also one of my final remaining relationships with my mother. It was absolutely ridiculous to think about giving it up, especially for someone like Savannah. They weren't listening to me when I attempted to convey that. They continued talking about how family supports family, and that since I don't have a family of my own, I don't really need all that space. Talking to a wall was like that regardless of what I said. They simply persisted in their efforts. Throughout the conversation, Savannah hardly spoke, but her arrogant expression said it all. She was sure they would get what they wanted by wearing me down. It's always been that way with her. People caving in and giving her exactly what she wants is nothing new to her. I asked her, "Savannah, would you really like to sit in my house?" At one point, "Seriously, this is my place, my home. Why don't you move into one of the apartments you guys looked up so helpfully? The legwork is already done by you. Why is it acceptable for you to accept my options but absurd for you to use those?" She merely gave me a blink, as if it were entirely alien to her to be the one to make concessions. Her mother interrupted, saying, "Oh, honey, you don't understand." In a sweet voice, Savannah requires consistency. She and the child won't be able to enjoy the same level of comfort and space in an apartment. It doesn't matter that I laughed bitterly. My comfort is irrelevant. You guys are amazing. You enter here with a demand. I uproot my entire life for Savannah's sake, and you expect me to just roll over and say yes? Savannah didn't flinch, just sat there with her arms crossed, that smug look plastered on her face like she'd already won. She wasn't even trying to engage, leaving her mom and my dad to do all the dirty work for her. It was obvious she didn't think she needed to explain herself. In her mind, it wasn't a request. It was an inevitable outcome. Her mom jumped in, her voice sharp and condescending. "It's not about your comfort. This is about what's best for the family. Savannah is bringing a new life into this world. Don't you think that's a little more important than your need for space? You're a grown man. You don't need a huge house all to yourself. It's selfish to hang on to something that could provide her and the kid a better start in life." I glanced at her, startled by the sheer boldness. Selfish. Are you serious right now? You think I'm selfish for preserving what my mom left me? This isn't simply some spot I'm hanging to. This is my house where I've constructed my life, and you're sitting here telling me I should simply hand it over like it's nothing. My dad sighed, visibly frustrated, and decided to get in. "We're not asking you to give it up permanently," he replied, as if that somehow made things better. "Just think of it as helping Savannah get back on her feet. Once she's secure, maybe she can move out and you can figure out something else for yourself. We're just trying to do what's best for everyone." For everyone. I lost my temper. Recognize that you are attempting to act in her best interests. Don't act like this is about the family or doing the right thing. This is about you expecting me to clean up the mess after you go above and above for Savannah, as you usually do. You know what? I'm not complying. Savannah's mother squinted. It's known as belonging to a family. For the sake of the larger good, sacrifices must occasionally be made. Your mother would if she were present. My voice interrupted chilly. You have no right to include my mother in this. She trusted me to take care of this house, so she left it to me. She was well aware of your behavior, and for that reason her will made no mention of any of you. Therefore refrain from sitting here and predicting her desires since you don't know. To that they said nothing. My dad left to do something else since he appeared uneasy. Savannah simply sat with her arms crossed and the same arrogant look on her face. She obviously believed that I would ultimately give in. She made no attempt to defend herself or to argue. Let my dad and her mother speak for themselves, as if she didn't need to defend this absurd request. It was just a question of when not. If they would receive what they wanted, there was no bargaining involved. However, they were playing with the wrong person. This time negotiation is not allowed in this house. I'm not going to let them shame me into giving it up since my mom trusted me with it. I knew, however, that this was not the end of it. As if they thought I might alter my mind, they left the conversation open-ended, but I didn't. I hoped they would calm down and see how absurd the situation was. I told them straight out no after that. However, that was only the start. Persistence seemed to be the key, according to my dad and his wife. As if I would finally give in if they persisted in bringing it up. Small, passive-aggressive remarks were the first. On occasion, my dad would phone and ask me if I was interested in lending a hand. As if I would suddenly become enlightened and give my house. His wife texted me articles about the value of helping single moms. Although Savannah mostly kept quiet, I could see she was sure my dad and her mother would take care of everything. Then they increased the stakes. They began to appear without warning, but it wasn't as if they were paying a visit. Whenever they arrived, they would always find a way to return the topic to Savannah and her demands. My dad once arrived with a package of baby clothing to store. He inquired where he may store it, as if it were the most commonplace item in the world. He could bring it back to his place, I said. He looked at me as if I had just insulted him. "It's only a temporary situation. You're not even utilizing the guest room," he replied. I informed him that storage was not allowed in the guest room. It was for visitors. After complaining, he finally returned the package to his vehicle. The tone for all subsequent interactions was established by that I would shut it off when they suggested a solution that required me to give up my own space. The problem is that I could see they didn't think I was the house's true owner. For them, it was only a useful tool at their disposal, but they desired. They pretended that it was still up for grabs, but my mom left it to me as like I had been saving it for Savannah until she needed it. The way they presented things as though I was the self-centered one really irritated me. They gave the impression that I was only sitting on this cosmic treasure trove and was being spiteful by not sharing it. Just saying no wasn't enough. I had to repeatedly explain my choice to individuals who didn't want to hear it. When Savannah made the decision to more forcefully intervene, things became more heated. She casually requested me to assist her in unloading a stroller after pulling up to my house one afternoon and popping her trunk. I questioned her why she was bringing a stroller to my house as I looked at her as if she had gone insane. Where else should I put it then? "I don't currently have the room," she remarked. I was trying to comprehend how outrageous her comment was. I said, already feeling irritated, "Not my problem." Naturally, it set her off. As though I had directly caused her issues, she went on a self-centered tirade about how I was making life so much more difficult for everyone. She said that family is meant to be together, as if it in some way made it okay to vent her problems on me. She went on, "Being in my situation is extremely stressful, and you have no idea how it feels. You have no concept what it's like to be expecting a child." She continued in a tone that implied I was some ignorant fool incapable of understanding reality. One thing she was correct about. I have experience with having obligations, but I have no idea what it's like to be pregnant. In contrast to her, I've been managing mine without anticipating help from others to make everything right. More significantly, I don't insist on sitting in other people's homes just because I'm short on room. Your problems aren't mine to solve, and I'm not going to completely upend my life because you won't solve yours, I told her bluntly. That was not well received. This expression of utter hatred twisted her face. The world didn't revolve around her as I just explained to her, which to be honest, I essentially did. She threw one final gem over her shoulder before storming off in a huff. "One day you will regret this." I didn't miss the irony of her entire outburst. She had been pampered and cared for all her life. For the first time, someone wasn't caving into her demands. She pretended that I was being unreasonable rather than acknowledging the ridiculousness of her demands, assuming she would simply park herself and her infant in the stroller she brought to my house. I had never seen anything so absurd as this. She seemed to sincerely think that my house was already hers, and that I was merely a barrier that needed to be taken away. The story didn't end there. They simply persisted in testing my boundaries. My dad and a realtor stopped by the other day. He didn't even notify me of his arrival. When I heard the knock on the door, I was seated in my living room. He was standing there with a woman holding a clipboard when I opened it. He said, "I thought we could talk about some options for you." I refused to let them in. I slammed the door after telling them to go. For me, that was the final straw. They were obviously not going to stop until I took drastic measures. I realized then that I could no longer rely on them. The home wasn't the only issue. The principle was at issue. Because that was how things had always worked with Savannah. They believed they could intimidate me into submitting. I don't roll over for anybody though, and I'm not Savannah. I made arrangements for cameras to be placed throughout my property that evening after calling a security firm. Although it wasn't a major relocation, it was a start in the right direction to safeguard my property. I wanted to be ready for any absurd prank they could do in the future. I genuinely no longer felt secure. They could come up with some ridiculous scheme to have me legally evicted from the house, or they might take away my fear of it. I was fully aware that they wouldn't stop until they came to a wall. They couldn't scale. I thus set out to be that wall. I refused to play their games any longer, and I refused to engage in any further discussions about just giving up my house. And just how I had anticipated. They had a fresh, even more imaginative concept. I got home from work one evening, fatigued, yet pleased to finally be back at my refuge. However, my key would not fit into the lock when I attempted to insert it. I initially believed I may have reached for the incorrect key, but it finally struck me after a few more attempts. They had replaced the locks. When I saw a folded piece of paper taped to the door, My heart fell, and I felt a flood of anger wash over me. "We've replaced the locks for safety," the letter said. "Please get in touch with us to talk about this." My father signed it. It was almost comical how bold they were. I wasted no time at all. Taking out my phone, I dialed my father. After a few rings, he picked up, and this casual tone wasn't the most crazy thing he had ever done. "What on earth is happening?" I said, struggling to maintain a steady voice. "Why have my house's locks been changed?" He stated it's only temporary. As if that improved things in any way. All we wanted to do was assist Savannah. We believed that because you've been so reluctant, this could be the simplest approach to help everyone. For everybody. I lost my temper. "You mean for Savannah and you?" "Every possible boundary has been crossed by you. Trespassing is what this is. And you're crazy if you think I'm simply going to overlook this." Immediately, his tone changed and he began pleading with me. "Don't contact the police, please. Don't make this worse. It will reflect poorly on the family. Feel sorry for the family. Do you believe that's what I'm worried about now?" I fired back. "This is what will take place. You'll get the person who changed the locks to take care of this right now. Or I'll contact the police and file charges for attempted theft and trespassing." He paused. And I thought for a second that he may really try to fight with me, but his tone softened even more, as if he understood I wasn't bluffing. All right, we'll repair it, however you're acting so irrationally. Our only goal is to act in Savannah's and the baby's best interests. This is a short-term fix, you know?" He tried to guilt me, but I ignored him. "The cops will get involved if you don't address this before the end of the day. That cannot be negotiated." He eventually consented after more mumbling and feeble arguments. My hands trembling with rage, I hung up without saying another thing. This was no ordinary overshoot. The act of taking what wasn't theirs was straightforward and well thought out. It was an obvious betrayal of my trust, my house, and my limits. The locksmith came back a few hours later and the locks were replaced. Neither Savannah nor her mother revealed their faces, and neither did my dad. I stayed at the entrance the whole time, keeping an eye on everything to make sure nothing was overlooked. After everything had returned to normal, I sat in my living room and gazed at the walls of the house that had turned into my battleground. It wasn't just another effort to push my boundaries or shame me. This was a war declaration. If they were ready to go this far, I knew then that things would not de-escalate on their own. They were in for a big shock if they thought I was just going to roll over and let them have their way, but there was no way of knowing what they might do next. I remained up late that night, making calls and going over papers. I wanted to be certain that they couldn't possibly pull that off again. However, the way they pretended that this was commonplace really got to me. They truly believed they had a right to my home. The fact that I had lived there for years and that my mother had bequeathed it to me was irrelevant. They saw it as merely a residence that they might steal if they so desired. I began the process of filing a lawsuit. I told my lawyer everything when we met together, including how my dad and stepmother had been putting constant pressure on me and how they had even changed the locks on my house, asking pointed questions regarding the house, my mom's will, and any strange conduct from my dad in the last few months. He listened intently. I initially assumed he was simply being meticulous, but then he sat back in his chair and said, "I have something to tell you. Your father has already asked if he may challenge your mother's will." I couldn't understand. "Do you mean to dispute it?" When months in the past. He clarified that although he didn't formally file anything, he did speak with a lawyer about the potential for arguing that the house is family property rather than your inheritance. I understand that he was searching for any opening that would allow him to take over the house. I pretended to be on my side, or at least tried to maintain harmony while I sat there in shock the entire time. My father had been planning to force me to leave the house. My stepmother did not come up with this on the fly of the moment, long before they ever began to put pressure on me to move out. They had been organizing it for months. He doesn't have a compelling argument. With a rapid addition, my lawyer must have seen my look of worry. The house was specifically bequeathed to you in your mother's will, which is unchangeable. However, it speaks much about his goals that he even thought about it. It went beyond simple treachery. It had been planned. While feigning concern for my welfare, my dad had been searching for methods to seize what my mother had left me. The emotional blackmail, the continual guilt trips, and the manipulation. Now everything made clear. This had nothing to do with Savannah's need for lodging. They were attempting to seize something that was not theirs. I became enraged upon hearing this. It's no longer simply about defending myself. It's about preserving what my mother has sacrificed her entire life for me. To her recollection, every action they take feels like a smack in the face, and I can't overlook it. I'm not going to back down no matter how unrelenting or ridiculous they get. They're not taking this house. It's mine. I'll update you all on the following developments. 1 update. Hi everyone. As soon as I decided what to do, I wanted to update you. So let's get started. I relived every conversation I had had with my dad over the previous several months for the remainder of that evening after learning what I had from my lawyer. I couldn't continue to stay away from him and yet be in the law. I had to tell him straight out that I was aware of his plans. So I went up to him. I didn't make an effort to text or call, like he and his wife had done to me so many times before I arrived at his house without warning. He was taken aback when he opened the door. He was taken by surprise, but his expression showed no signs of guilt. That was the most painful aspect. He pretended that he had no reason to be ashamed. I got right to the point when I stated, "I need to know why you've been looking into contesting Mom's will." His expression contorted into one of defensiveness and bewilderment. "What are you discussing?" He pretended not to know. "I'm not sure where you got this notion, but it's untrue." "Don't tell me lies," I fired back. "Let's hear it. I already know you discussed it with a lawyer months ago. How did you intend to proceed?" He stumbled over his words and emphasized, "It's not like that. I had no intention of taking anything. All I wanted to do was see whether the family had any choices. For the household." I reiterated, my tone piercing with incredulity. "Let's be honest. The family isn't the point. It has to do with Savannah. Don't just stand here and act like this has nothing to do with whatever else you had planned to take. Mom left me 1 item, and you believe that's acceptable. I had nothing planned." He lost his temper. "I was simply thinking about what may be possible. In any case, the house is too large for you. Savannah too. She's in a difficult situation. For the baby, she needs a secure home. Stealing mine is necessary for that." I shot back, my annoyance exploding. "I wasn't even asked to help. You attempted to influence me behind my back, and now you're pretending to be helping me out." "That wasn't the case," weakly. He repeated, but he avoided looking into my eyes. As he often did when he didn't want to acknowledge his mistake, he glanced everywhere but at me. I waited for a while, hoping he would say anything to make any of this seem reasonable. He didn't. I turned to go, shaking my head. Arguing with someone who was unable of taking responsibility for their actions was pointless. What I already knew was confirmed by that exchange. He was untrustworthy. He was not behaving like a dad. Because it suited his story, he was behaving as though he owned my life, my house, and my decisions. I phoned my lawyer when I got home to talk about my options. He informed me that my dad had no legal defense and that my mother's will was unquestionably sound. Nevertheless, it was evident that this went beyond the law. Wearing me down was the goal. They were attempting to convince me that the war was not worthwhile, as if giving in and letting them have their way would be simpler. The weeks that followed were filled with meetings, emails, and unwavering attention to detail to make sure the residence was completely secured in my name and that there were no gaps they might take advantage of. I completed the necessary documentation. I added extra cameras, updated my security system, and even contacted a title protection firm to monitor for any suspicious activities. To be honest, it seemed like I was defending a fortress from intruders, and that's precisely what it was. Meanwhile, Savannah intensified her strategy. She began sharing cryptic posts on social media about having to stand up for what's right after her family abandoned her. Although she didn't specifically mention me, it was clear who she was referring to. Friends and acquaintances began contacting each other to inquire about the situation and whether there was a way to resolve it. My answers were succinct and straightforward. I had no interest in playing her game or telling the public my side of the tale. However, as the weeks passed, their efforts began to wane. My lawyer promised me that they would soon run out of choices because the legal bills were mounting on their end. I still had the uneasy sensation that this was not the end of it. They are the kind of people that never give up, they reorganize. Come up with fresh strategies and reappearance at unexpected times. I was really exhausted by the time things eventually calmed down. It took all I had to defend my borders, my house, and my quiet. However, it was worthwhile. There was more to this than a home. It was about defending my rights and not letting anyone abuse me. Savannah and my father believed they could use guilt to get me to comply. but they were completely mistaken. If anything, this entire experience has made me more aware of the extent to which they would go in order to control me. To be honest, I'm beginning to believe that the only way to really move on would be to sever relations. It's quiet for the moment. I'm not naive, though. I'll be prepared if they attempt any tricks once more. I might just return with an update if anything changes. I appreciate you staying and listening. I would appreciate it if you could provide some support or perhaps some suggestions. The last update. Hello, everyone. I wanted to update you on all that has transpired since I last posted. I feel like I'm finally emerging from this crazy, but it's been quite the journey. Fortunately, I'm still in my home and I plan to stay there. Let me explain it to you. They made every effort to get me out of the home before retreating for a bit. Things became disturbingly silent as the weeks stretched into months. No random visits from Savannah or her mother, no messages, no calls. They seemed to be regrouping, which was an odd feeling, but I wasn't going to gripe about the quiet Savannah gave birth to a healthy son during that period based on what I've heard from others. Perhaps they were too preoccupied with the infant to continue to annoy me, I reasoned. Or perhaps they had given up at last. When I heard the knock, it was late one evening. They were there when I looked at my security cameras. Savannah, my dad, and his wife were all standing there as if they were about to do an intervention. Even though I considered ignoring them, I chose to open the door mostly because I was curious to know what justification they would offer this time. My dad's wife began to talk inanely as soon as I opened the door. She stated that they wanted to move on as a family and had been reflecting on all that had transpired. She claimed they were giving me one final chance to do things right and talked about letting the past be the past, then using her infant as a prop. Savannah spoke up. She continued by talking about how difficult life had been for her, how she wanted her child to grow up with family, and how she still thought that if I just let my heart be open, I could do the right thing. They had been spewing the same manipulative nonsense for months, but now they were encasing it in a more attractive wrapper. Ever the peacemaker. My dad attempted to play the "let's all just get along" card. He discussed the importance of family over worldly possessions and the necessity for me to see the wider picture. I gave them time to speak, out of morbid curiosity. Mostly, I took a big breath and told them everything when they eventually stopped. I said as quietly as I could, "This is my house. My mother left it to me and I'm not giving it up. I am repeating what I have already told you." "No," is the response. "I don't care how you're trying to spin things or what sort of speech you've practiced. The decision to deny you the house is final. It ought to have ended there." Naturally. Though it wasn't, Savannah's mother instantly sprang to allegations yelling about my selfishness and how I was neglecting my alleged duties and prioritizing material possessions over family. She used every defense she could think of to paint me as the bad guy in this whole thing. Next to leap in was Savannah. She wailed about how difficult I was making her life and how she couldn't believe I would leave her and the baby in their hour of need, all along the same script. She used the well-known phrase, "I'd regret this one day," as though I would look back and wish I had let them to walk all over me. At first, my dad didn't say much, but the quiet was more powerful than words. He didn't even try to diffuse the situation or mediate it. He just stood there and let everything happen. He was obviously at a loss for words, and perhaps a tiny part of him recognized how far things had gone. I had no desire to debate. They had already gone too far, and I wasn't going to allow them to drag me into yet another meaningless argument. "All of my boundaries have already been breached by you," I said. "You have attempted to steal what is rightfully mine, twisted and lied. You're back here now pretending to be the victims. I've finished this. Leave my land." Not unexpectedly, though, they stayed. Savannah's mother persisted, accusing me of being irrational and attempting to use guilt to get me to give in. Savannah occasionally added her voice, mentioning in passing how families ought to help one another and how I was callous for not stepping up. When my father did speak, it was just to make another feeble attempt to get me to be rational and consider their point of view. I didn't answer. Nothing else could be said. Rather, I stepped back into the home, shut the door, and turned around. I had already made the decision to stop playing their games. They may face the repercussions if they continued to push. I contacted the cops once I was inside. I wasn't going to give them the impression that I was bluffing. The dispatcher promised to send out an officer as soon as I described the problem. They stayed in my driveway, continuing chatting among themselves as I stood at the window and watched. They were off the porch by the time the cops showed up, but they were not trying to get away. Clearly outlining the law, the cops conversed with them for a few minutes. I could tell that the police were not accepting their explanations or excuses. They gave them clear instructions to depart and never return. There was a feeling of closure as well as a minor victory when they eventually left under police supervision. I had lost what little relationship I still had with my father. I became aware of my fatigue as I took a seat to gather my thoughts. I had lost so much because of them. Not only time and effort, but the sense of safety I had experienced at home. Nevertheless, I knew I had made the proper decision. It wasn't simply vital to set limits with folks like them, it was survival. That evening, I decided something I wasn't finished with the turmoil in the home, I was finished with them all. I unfollowed them on social media, banned their numbers, and let common acquaintances know that I didn't want any updates or messages to be shared. At first, severing links was difficult. However, after reviewing what they had done, I came to the conclusion that nothing could be saved. They had no regard for my limits or for me. All that mattered to them was what I could provide. I relied more on my pals than on my poisonous family. They had supported me during all the turmoil, letting me know that I wasn't insane for refusing to back down. I should have a housewarming party. One of them said I had worked so hard to keep the house, not because it was brand new. I laughed at the thought, but it also seemed appropriate. Only a few close friends attended the tiny but ideal gathering. I felt truly joyful for the first time in a long time. I wasn't only getting by, I was doing well. I'm pleased with how I handled everything. When I think back on it, I wanted to quit up at times since it wasn't easy, but I persisted. I demonstrated to myself that I am stronger than I ever imagined by standing my ground. This home serves as more than simply a residence. It serves as a reminder of all that I have battled for. It represents my self-reliance, fortitude, and capacity to defend the moral high ground in the face of adversity. Family isn't about blood, if that's what I've learned from all of this. Mutual support, trust, and respect are key. And no matter who they are, they don't deserve a place in your life if they aren't prepared to provide you those things. So to anyone else who is dealing with a similar situation, don't back down. Establish your limits. Additionally, don't allow somebody to shame you into betraying them. You have no acquaintances, your tranquility, your security, or your contentment. All of this is behind me. Now, I still reside in my home, and each time I enter, I am reminded of the things I have conquered. It is more than a dwelling. It's home, and I'm not going to let anyone take that away.